The laughter of children filled the classroom, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that lifts hearts. It was sharp, cruel, and aimed like arrows at a single boy who sat hunched at the back of the room. His hands were dirty, his nails rough, and though he tried to hide them under the desk, the others had noticed. They whispered, they pointed, and then the giggles turned into outright mockery. His face burned with shame, his eyes cast down at the scratched wooden surface before him. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the chair so no one could see him. He had known hunger, he had known cold nights, but nothing pierced him quite like the laughter of those who could never understand. And then, just as the cruel chorus grew louder, the classroom door opened. The teacher walked in, took one long look at the trembling boy with the dirty hands, and did something that silenced everyone. She crossed the room, bent down, and hugged him tightly. Before we go deeper into this story of pain, resilience, and the power of a single act of kindness, take a moment right now, if you believe in compassion, in second chances, and in the ability of love to transform lives, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to I Am Kindness Corner. Together, we can spread stories that remind the world what humanity truly means. His name was Miguel. He was only 10 years old, but his life had already been marked by hardships most adults would struggle to endure. His father had left when he was just a toddler, and his mother worked from sunrise to long after sunset cleaning houses, scrubbing floors, and doing laundry for families who never once asked how she was holding up. They lived in a tiny room at the edge of town, with peeling paint on the walls, a single dim bulb, and more drafts than warmth. Every morning, before school, Miguel would help his mother by carrying heavy buckets of water from the community tap, washing the clothes she couldn't finish the night before, and sometimes even doing odd jobs at a nearby mechanic shop just to earn a few coins. By the time he walked into school, his small hands were already rough, smudged with dirt and grease. He didn't mean to come to class like that. He wished for clean clothes, soft hands, and shiny shoes like the other children. But soap and water were luxuries when there wasn't enough food to fill their stomachs. Every day he would sit quietly in the back, hoping no one would notice, hoping he could just blend in. Yet children notice everything. They noticed the dirt on his knuckles, the cracks on his skin, the way his shoes were too small and falling apart. And because they were too young to understand struggle, they laughed. It started with whispers, with mocking glances, with the kind of smirks that make your heart sink. Soon, it became bolder, snickers during lessons, cruel jokes at recess, even little chants about dirty hands echoing through the playground. Miguel tried to ignore it, but each word carved deeper into his heart. He began to walk with his fists closed tight, ashamed of the very hands that worked so hard to keep him and his mother alive. One morning, the bullying reached its peak. As he sat at his desk, two boys in the row ahead of him deliberately pointed at his hands and laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. The laughter spread like wildfire across the classroom, louder and louder, until Miguel could no longer pretend not to hear. His ears burned, his throat tightened, and his eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. He thought he would break in that moment. But then, salvation arrived. The classroom door swung open. Their teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, walked in, her presence commanding silence almost instantly. She was not just a teacher of lessons but of life, known for her fierce sense of justice and her tender heart. She looked around, confused at the sudden hush in the room, and then her eyes landed on Miguel. His head was bowed, his shoulders trembling, and his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Mrs. Ramirez noticed the mocking expressions on the other children's faces, and in an instant, she understood. Without saying a word, she walked directly to Miguel's desk. The room was so quiet now that the hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed deafening. She bent down, gently took his clenched fists into her hands, and slowly opened them. Everyone could see the dirt, the calluses, the little scars etched across his skin. For a moment, Miguel thought she too would scold him or ask why he hadn't come to school clean. But instead, she pulled him into her arms and hugged him tightly in front of the whole class. The children gasped. Some shifted awkwardly in their seats, unsure of what to make of it. But Mrs. Ramirez spoke, her voice steady and full of warmth. She explained that Miguel's hands were not dirty because he was lazy or careless. They were the hands of a boy who worked harder than any of them could imagine. They were hands that carried water before dawn, hands that helped his mother survive, hands that showed responsibility and strength beyond his years. She told the class that these hands, rough and tired though they were more beautiful than the cleanest hands in the room, because they told a story of love and sacrifice. Miguel could not stop the tears now. But they were no longer tears of shame, they were tears of release, of gratitude, of finally being seen for who he truly was. The hug of his teacher was more than comfort, it was validation, a shield against the cruelty of the world. From that day forward, the laughter stopped. The same classmates who had mocked him began to respect him. Some even tried to befriend him, awkwardly at first, but sincerely. The memory of their teacher's words lingered in their young minds, changing the way they looked at Miguel and perhaps even the way they saw others who were different from themselves. For Miguel, life did not magically become easy. He still woke early to help his mother, still carried buckets and washed clothes, still came to school with tired eyes and sometimes worn-out clothes. But he carried himself differently now. He no longer hid his hands. Instead, he sat at his desk with his palms open on the table, unashamed, proud of what they represented. That small act of courage, that simple hug, had given him back his dignity. Years passed, and Miguel never forgot that day. He grew into a young man with the same hard-working hands, but with dreams far greater than his circumstances. Inspired by the compassion of his teacher, he pursued education with relentless determination. He studied late into the night, often under a single weak lamp, his rough hands turning the pages of borrowed books. Eventually, through scholarships and sheer perseverance, Miguel became the first in his family to attend university. He chose to study education, not because it was easy, but because he wanted to be the kind of teacher who could change lives the way Mrs. Ramirez had changed his. When he finally graduated and returned to his community as a teacher, people barely recognized him. His clothes were crisp, his voice steady, and his smile warm. But his hands, though still strong and calloused, remained the truest part of his story. On his first day as a teacher, as he looked into the faces of his students, he silently promised that no child under his care would ever feel invisible or unloved. And somewhere deep within, he carried the memory of a hug that had once saved him, a hug that had reminded him that worth is not found in appearances but in the strength of the human spirit. So if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of compassion and the importance of standing up for those who cannot defend themselves, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to I Am Kindness Corner. Your support helps keep stories of humanity and hope alive. And before we end, I have a special request. Please comment below with these words: kindness changes everything. Let's fill the comments with a message strong enough to remind the world that no act of love is ever wasted. They mocked his dirty hands, until the teacher hugged him. And in that single act, a life was transformed, a heart was healed, and a future was rewritten.